January 5th, 1914, Highland Park, Michigan. By 6 a.m., word has already spread through the tenements of Detroit. Henry Ford is about to announce something at his own factory gates. The next morning, more than 10,000 men show up outside the plant, hoping to be hired. It is 8 degrees below freezing. The crowd is so large, so desperate, that the company turns fire hoses on it just to keep people back from the gates. They are not. They're for a raise. They are there for a job that, as of that week, pays more than double what any factory job in America pays. The Wall Street Journal calls what Ford just did, quote, an economic crime. His own rivals call it insane. So the question worth sitting with is not whether Henry Ford was generous. It's what he actually built with that money and what it cost the people who took it. Here's what you'll know. By the end of this story, how one wage decision on one January morning helped invent the American middle class, and how the same man who made it would later use his own company to crush the very workers he'd raised up. Keep one number in mind as we go: 380%. That's the turnover rate inside Ford's own factories the year before the raise. We'll come back to what that number actually meant. By 1913, Henry Ford has already changed how cars get built. The moving assembly line, workers standing still while the car itself travels past them on a belt, has cut the time to build a Model T from 12 hours down to about 90 minutes. It is brilliant. It is also brutal. The job is the same motion, 400 times an hour for 9 hours a day. Men are quitting so fast that Ford has to hire nearly 1,000 workers for every 100 jobs he actually needs filled just to keep the line staffed. Foremen walk the floor firing and rehiring by the hour. The man running Ford's finances, a former coal dealer named James Couzens, starts doing the arithmetic. Every worker who quits costs the company money in training and lost time on the line. Couzens looks at the number, that 380% turnover, and tells Ford, in effect, that the company is bleeding cash just to replace men who walk out the door. Ford's answer, on January 5th, 1914, is to cut the workday from 9 hours to 8, and to more than double the base pay, from about $2.34 a day to $5 a day. Reporters run the math live. At the average factory, a laborer earns roughly $11 a week. Ford is now offering it is the difference between renting one room and buying a house on payments. And here is what most people telling the story leave out. The $5 day was never a flat wage. It was $2.34 in base pay plus a profit share worth up to $2.66 more, that you only collected if you passed inspection by something Ford created called the Sociological Department. Investigators from that department visited workers' homes. According to company records from investigated Ford Corcoran's home, the period, they checked whether a man drank, whether he was married, whether his house was clean, whether he was, in the department's own language, living, quote, a clean and moral life. Unmarried men living alone were at first excluded outright. Women were excluded entirely, regardless of the work they did. Black workers, hired in larger numbers than most Detroit employers of the era, were still funneled almost exclusively into the foundry, the hottest, most dangerous work in the employers of the era. Were still plant, so the raise that made headlines around the world came with a price. Henry Ford's company now had a say in how you lived, not just how you worked. Here's the turn almost nobody expects. It worked. For the business, turnover at Highland Park collapses from that staggering 380% down to under 20% within a year. Productivity climbs high enough that Ford actually cuts the price of the Model T5 separate times. Between 1914 and 1920, from around $850 down to under $350. Workers who once could never dream of owning one of these cars are now on a $5 day, saving enough to buy one on installment. Ford himself later put it plainly, telling a reporter that the payment of $5 a day for an 8-hour day was, quote, one of the finest cost-cutting moves we ever made. Not charity. Strategy. And it spreads. Other manufacturers, terrified of losing every good worker they have to Ford, start raising wages just to compete. Historians studying the period point to 1914 through the 1920s as the moment ordinary industrial families first started buying homes, appliances, and cars on a regular paycheck rather than scraping by week to week. That is, in large part, the birth of American mass consumption, a working class that could afford to buy the very products it built. But the same instinct that built the $5 day, Ford's belief that he alone knew what was good for his workers, never went away. It just changed shape. By the 1930s, as the Depression crushes Detroit and the United Auto Workers try to organize Ford's plants, that instinct has a new name, the Ford Service Department, run by a former boxer named Harry Bennett. On May 26, 1937, a group of union organizers walks toward an overpass near the Rouge Plant to hand out leaflets. Among them is a young labor organizer named Walter Reuther. According to newspaper photographers on the scene that day, photographs that ran nationwide, Ford Service Department men beat Reuther and several others on the overpass steps, in full view of the cameras. Reuther later testified before Congress that he was kicked, punched, and thrown down a flight of concrete stairs. The press calls it the Battle of Reuther. The overpass. It becomes one of the most famous photographs in American labor history. The same company that had once been praised for paying men enough to live on now photographed beating men for asking to be heard. 5 years earlier, in March of 1932, it had already turned fatal. Unemployed auto workers organized what became known as the Ford Hunger March, walking toward the Rouge Plant to demand jobs and relief during the worst of the Depression. Dearborn. Police and Ford servicemen opened fire on the crowd. 4 marchers were killed. The company that once symbolized generosity now symbolized something closer to fear. So go back to that 380%. That was never a number about kindness. It was a number about cost. Henry Ford didn't raise wages because he believed workers deserved more. He raised them because turnover was eating his profits, and James Couzens showed him the receipt. Then, the control with the same instinct, wearing 2 different faces, Ford deciding unilaterally what was best for the men who built his cars. By 1921, Ford quietly dissolved the Sociological Department. The home inspections had become a public embarrassment, and the company simply let it fade rather than defend it. The $5 day itself lasted only a few years in its original form before inflation ate away its value. But the idea underneath it never left. Pay workers enough, and they become your customers too. That idea outlived Ford's own contradictions, and it is arguably still the foundation of how modern retailers and manufacturers think about wages today. One more fact before we close this. The same year Ford's $5 day made front pages around the world, the United States government had no minimum wage law at all. That wouldn't arrive for another 24 years in 1938, and when it finally did, it was set at 25 cents an hour. Ford had voluntarily paid more than double that over 2 decades before the law required anyone to pay a minimum at all. And James Couzens, the treasurer who ran the numbers that made the $5 day possible, didn't stay at Ford much longer. He and Henry Ford fell out within a few years over exactly how much control one man should have over a company that size. Couzens left, became mayor of Detroit, then a United States senator, and spent much of his own fortune on causes Ford never would have touched. That falling out and what Couzens did next is a story on